right standards, right education system.
I'm the former Frank Key.
Of the Northwest Pass, we really need somebody different.
Your career, you're used to winning a lot. It was everything to us.
7 or 8 weeks of two-a-days.
They really made me appreciate
We're allowed to win.
he's coming in and we'll be shooting the whole time.
Let's go back real quick to the Enid Walk of Fame. Of course, we have training in confined space.
Gentlemen, maybe to know a little more.
A good safety tip on that, Steve.
Putting a hat on and getting out there and doing the job.
The television model that you watched growing up.
Houston, this is the International Space Station.
City Connections begins right now.
Hello again and welcome to City Connections. I'm Steve Kime with the City of Enid. Thank you for joining us today. And as we try often throughout the year, we always try to provide legislative and also even congressional and DC updates on what's going on in our world, in our country, and also impacting us here in Enid and also in northwestern Oklahoma. Well, once again, back to the Enid Television Network studios is our good friend, Senator Roland Pederson. And Roland is the representing District 19, which involves these 4 counties, Alfalfa, Grant, Garfield, and Kay counties. So he's got a big desk. He has a big office, if you will. Second generation farmer, and of course we know him in his background as an educator. He has a bachelor and master's degree from Northwestern in Alva. And Senator Pederson's interest, just to remind you, of course, has always been in education, small business, and agriculture, and also infrastructure. Served in the Air Force Reserves and at least a few of the committees that he's serving on at the state capitol in Oklahoma City. Serves on the agriculture, the appropriations, energy, retirement, and insurance committees, and I'm sure the laundry list of things that he does at the Capitol is a lot more. Welcome to the Enid Television Network studios, Senator Roland Pederson. Roland, we always appreciate your time. You're very accessible, and we appreciate that. And I know the viewers always like these updates. You know, all they know is what they read in the papers. Who said that? Was that Will Rogers or something? But we appreciate the update. Well, let's kind of talk about the past for a little bit. It seems like Governor Fallin just signed kind of this year's budget bill into law recently, and $6.9 billion, boy, it's a lot of money, and it covers the fiscal year up to June. And I guess that should have been signed maybe last year, but it was finally done this year. So how would you summarize last year's session? And it was your first session, correct?
That's correct.
Last year was the first year. So how would you summarize all that fun?
Well, I've told several people that if I could sum it all up in one word, it'd be frustration. Part of the fact that I really didn't know what I was getting into, what to expect, but then I was told by several people that this was a very unusual legislative session, and we had $1 billion shortfall in the budget, and just everybody, I was just overwhelmed with the amount of information that came to me, and really found out that hey, we have a problem, and it's a revenue. I've determined that it's a revenue problem. Not all the senators, not all of the House members think that that's the problem. But in my opinion, I've determined that we have a shortfall in revenue, and it was frustrating not to be able to move some revenue forward in order to plug some of those holes.
Sure. So I think a lot of individuals would join you in summarizing and say it was frustrating, because I think people sit back sometimes and watch things on the news or read the paper, and they're frustrated because they'll read a story and they may be frustrated and say, well, why can't we get anything done? So on the other side of that, Senator, besides frustration, you summarize the session that way, but what would be some highlights that in your first year representing District 19, what would be some of the highlights that you felt good about?
Well, the fact that we actually pretty much closed the $1 billion shortfall.
No easy task.
No easy task, and don't mean to correct you on anything that you said so far, but actually the second special session is actually still in session, which is an extension of the first session. I mean, in theory, we got the budget done. We closed the gap by cutting some revenue or cutting some items, but from my understanding, and I kind of misquoted that myself whenever I wrote my last column that I put in the paper, that the session was over, but we still gavel in, gavel out with hopefully some revenue bill that might be able to be advanced. But now we're getting to a point where any bill that raises revenue, of course, has to originate in the House. And if it becomes a legitimate revenue stream, it has to be in place 90 days before it can really be put in place. So we're now within 90 days of closure of the second session, but we've left the first first session still open. I probably really got everybody confused, and I'm sort of confused.
It's kind of
too,
like school. School is never out. So here in Oklahoma, the legislative session is never out. No, I guess I'd moved on.
Well,
I personally had moved on.
And I kind of had too, because theoretically it is over, but we've left an avenue for if some funding is found, it can still be implemented and get it in the fiscal year. That's the way I understand it anyway. But anyway, we're well into the second half of the 56th legislative session now.
Very good. Well, the last time that you were at the Enid Television Network studios, I'd asked you about what was kind of new to you in the process or overwhelming, and I think one of your comments was just the amount of information that, as you went in first-time senator, just the wealth of information that came your way. So from a personal, not a group perspective, Senator, but from a personal note, what did you feel was that you were most proud of? First time, overwhelmed with information, but I'm sure there were some personal successes.
Well, I could still breathe at the end.
That's a big one.
And I don't need to make light of anything, but just the fact that you survived, that I survived, and my 13 fellow freshman senators survived, and probably the fact that we do work together a lot more than what people really we're given credit to. Both sides of the aisles of the Senate, we're very open to each other, have a little different ideology on some things, but I was proud of the fact that I felt like I could reach out, and they were my friends, and they actually listened to me, and I listened to them. And you would, when you hear a lot of the things that go on in the news, you'd think there was, a lot of animosity between people, but it isn't really that way. So the fact that we were able to work together and accomplish closing the hole in the budget, even though we did cut.
Sure. Along lines of personal successes, you talked a little bit about the frustration or the challenges was just the frustration of trying to get things moved forward. Have you got a handle on why it's difficult to move forward? Is it just so many ideas, or
well,
it may be difficult to summarize, but
I would say, and I know I'm not a political guy. I just kind of say the way I think things are, If you like that, why you agree, that's fine. If you don't, why that's all right too. But as far as the budget goes, we've got with a 640 question that was several years ago, back in the 90s, where 75% of the legislature has to agree on a revenue increase. And that it was a result of overtaxation back in the day, back in the 90s. And so that idea came forward and put on a ballot, and it was approved by the voters at that time. And it's in the Constitution that 75% has to approve of a revenue increase. And I've made the illustration that whenever you go to any kind of a sporting event, and the score is 70-30, you've slam dunked the opponent. You've really won big. But when it comes to raising revenue in Oklahoma, you lose, because 70% of the legislature can agree to raise a revenue measure, move that forward, and if 30% disagree, then it doesn't advance. So that's the part of the frustration that I feel, and I think all legislators feel, that we can. That seems to be a problem. So I would guess that would be what I would say is our inability to really accomplish what we really need, an increased stream of revenue.
As my wife would say, sometimes it's like herding cats. And we've heard that. If you're a proud cat owner, you know that kind of challenge. Our special guest today on City Connections is Senator Roland Pederson, of representing District 19. Again, Alfalfa, Grant, Garfield, and Kay counties he represents. Let's talk about those counties for just a moment, Senator. Have you found it to be successful to be in 4 places at once?
Well, my Fridays get filled up with events like today.
Yeah.
I have several things to go to today, and I try to reserve Friday to spend in the district and try to just keep people informed, mainly through some newspaper articles that I try to write at least every 3 weeks. And I try, my objective is to do it every 2 weeks, but it kind of ends up 3 weeks whenever you really realize it about Friday, on Wednesday or Thursday, hey, I haven't written that article yet. And then if you don't make it if it doesn't get to the paper by Monday morning, why it doesn't get in that edition.
Kind of sounds like city government, that the week 7 days is really not 7 days. It's almost 3 or 4. It just goes.
Exactly.
It just
fast.
goes so quick. Well, let's talk about some things that are closer to home. Again, representing those 4 counties, and that's why we appreciate your time today, because we realize you're representing 4 counties and entities, and there's a lot of people pulling on your time. But closer to home, is there any current legislation that's taken place that really impacts us right here in our backyard?
Actually, right now I've got a bill that's going to be heard in the Senate next week. It is what I call a water bill, 1294, Senate Bill 1294. And it impacts the way water is developed in the aquifers. Enid wells are depleting, and thus they got the call water project, but they still need some additional water and rely on those wells between now and then.
Wouldn't it be great to have just a good rain?
It would, yeah, for sure, especially with my crops growing at home. But that's a bill that'll make it easier for the water board to set minimum annual yields for water aquifers, and that's an important water bill that will help Enid in particular.
Okay. Well, water is so important in our state. I mean, even in the Oklahoma City area, they're doing a $1 billion project to run a pipeline along an existing pipeline to get water from southeastern Oklahoma up to I think Lake Thunderbird, and off it goes. So water's the new gold, isn't it?
I would commend the city of Enid for looking forward, because in 50 years this project I think you'll look back on it and say that's probably one of the best things that ever happened to the city.
Yeah. I think one of our fields or pipelines from the Drummond area was from the 80s, and they had the foresight back in the 80s to say, hey, it's going to be 2018 one of these days, and we need to make sure that we do that. So, one other thing, everybody's on the roads, residential streets, state highways, interstates, turnpikes, and it's amazing how potholes show up, and just a variety of things, or we're narrowed down to one lane because we're working on a bridge and so forth. I understand that you're working with Mike Patterson with the Oklahoma Department of Transportation and City Manager Gerald Gilbert here in Enid to organize kind of a meeting with ODOT. Tell us about that, if you would, Senator.
I appreciate Gerald picking up the ball on that, and because Mike Patterson, when I talked to him, I told him, I said, I get a lot of emails regarding the roads and potholes and how bad some of the roads are. Yeah. I said, really would like for you to come up and take a look at them. And he said, I'd love to. Not that he doesn't already know kind of a lot about what's going on, but I said, some of my constituents there in the Enid area would sure like to have a sit-down visit with you on some of those projects that were talked about and were promised 8 years ago, and they're still moving in that direction. But I'd really like to have you sit down and talk to them, because I really wouldn't be able to answer their question. And he said he'd love to, and so trying to find a date, and I think we've kind of agreed May the 4th at 10 o'clock, and I'm letting Gerald kind of figure out where he wants to do that and get the word out. And so hopefully everybody will and if that wants to be in attendance, will have that opportunity.
Well, we'll do our part within the City of Enid government to get the word out about that meeting with Mike Patterson at ODOT. I do recall he was up here a couple years ago, and we had a meeting in our city council chambers and talked about roads as well. So, well, thank you for joining us on City Connections. Our special guest, Senator Roland Pederson, representing District 19. We're going to talk about wind farms and military, and we're going to do that right after this break. Thanks for staying with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back to City Connections. Thank you for staying with us. Our special guest, Oklahoma Senator Roland Pederson, representing District 19. Roland, if you drive, well, I guess really kind of the western part of Oklahoma, I know if you drive out I-40 towards Clinton and Elk City that way, you just see more and more of these wind turbines are up. And then if you get on 412 and other highways here in northwestern Oklahoma, you see these turbines showing up and really dotting the landscape. And here we are in the Enid community, and the conversation comes up that some of the Vance pilots see on their radar these little turbines, and they don't know what it is, if you will. So undoubtedly, it's impacting military a little bit. What discussions are in place, or what is going on regarding the relationship with wind farms and military? Because we've got bases in Altus and Midwest City, and the list goes on.
Well, last summer, there was an interim study that was done, and I was able to get in on part of it. I wasn't able to be there for all of it. But it mainly was talking about the conflict with the wind generators and missions that the Air Force has, that they fly every day and have to deal with those. And there seemed to be some kind of a conflict about where those wind towers were placed and private property rights and the whole gamut of things that were involved with the wind generators. But as you know, it's been a big boom. The wind generators have been a big boom, especially to District 19.
Right.
There's a lot of them out there, and of course, another big factor here is the Vance Air Force Base, and so we're kind of right in the middle of that deal. But from what I've gathered, they've worked that out now a lot better in where those windmills can be established to where they do not conflict with the flight patterns that the Air Force has. And I think probably the process, there was a process already in place, but through some of the one or two bills that's advanced, it'll make it a lot easier. I know Mike Cooper, he's kind of the contact, the liaison between the city and Vance Air Force Base, and he's been very instrumental in trying to make this deal work out. And the last report that I heard, that it's all agencies are working together to get those things placed right to where they're not in interference with the Air Force and with the companies that are promoting them or that are developing them, and also then in the Pentagon even is involved in some of that discussion. Sure. So they're all working together, from what I understand, a lot better than what they were to begin with.
Very good. Well, we're all interested in economic development, and I have a good farmer friend, if I can use that phrase, in Billings, and he's proud owner of 3 of those turbines on his farm, and so he's definitely pleased with that. But he's well aware of the impact that this can happen to our state in regards to military bases. Roland, you touched on a little bit about water and the water bill that you were working on, and you presented and so forth, and you're aware that the City of Enid voters had voted in favor of funding this Call Lake pipeline, about 70 miles from the Call Lake through Osage, Noble, and to Garfield counties to right here in Enid. And it's obvious there's no money in the state to say we can help you, Enid, on the pipeline. Are you aware of any options? I mean, what can communities do in regards to help and funding on these major projects? I think we're looking at $300 million plus for just this pipeline, but yet it's going to bring water to northwest Oklahoma, so it's very critical for the next 50, 60 years. Where do communities find the money to help do these things?
Well, when I talked
Got
to
a magical answer?
yeah, I do actually. Brent Kissling mentioned in a meeting that I was with him where I was with him here a few weeks ago, and talked about Enid being $1 billion economic base.
Right.
And if that happens, that's sales tax money that comes in. That money will result in sales tax, and that's going to help fund the project. Just the whole economic development of the area, that'll all help bring that money in to fund the project. So my hope is that the economy will pick up, that people will spend that money that they make, and we'll get this funded, and we'll have water for the next 50 years.
And it's important to note that without water, there is no growth.
Exactly.
Because if an organization, company, Fortune 100 company is looking to relocate to Enid, Oklahoma, they may be asking the question, well, how about development? How about water? How about infrastructure? That's all part of that equation. Well, Senator, there's been a lot of talk about Step Up Oklahoma. A lot of business leaders got together and said, hey, here's a plan that we can fund teachers, education, and the list goes on. Can you kind of tell us where the Step Up Oklahoma plan is? I thought it kind of went to the wayside, but from a senator at the Capitol, tell us about Step Up Oklahoma. What's the status?
Well, Steve, I think it's still alive, although whenever the Step Up plan people really came to the Capitol and really started promoting it, that was all really good, but they were only about a month behind. And you can always sit back and think what you should have done.
Sure.
But if they'd have been there like 2 months before, I think it would have carried. But when they really moved forward with their plan and tried lobbying the legislators, they actually got less votes than what the bill that went through 2 months before that. So I think it's still there. I think if we try to do some individual parts of it instead of trying to run it all together as one big plan, I think parts of it has legs to stand on and will pass. Again, though, it's 75%, so it's going to be a tough battle. Right. But the fact that they're on board certainly won't hurt, and I appreciate their efforts of stepping up and doing what they did with the Step Up plan. So.
Well, let's segue into the topic that Step Up Oklahoma seems to be all about. It has to deal with education and teacher salary, things of this nature. What is the latest on funding for education? What can you tell us today? And I'm sure tomorrow it'll be different, and next week it'll be different. But kind of where are we at?
Well, I would tell you that the legislature is concerned about that. They have been ever since I've been there the last 2 years.
Sure.
And I tell people I was elected as a public education supporter, and I have voted for every type of revenue proposal that's been presented and in support of that. And moving forward, I think we still like teachers, and we still want a teacher pay raise. But some of the demands that are being assessed right now with the legislature, I think it's too much, and it's not going to happen. The $10,000 that's being proposed, the money is not there, and I don't think that there's political will to make it there either, especially in the short amount of time that they're giving to come up with it. But I think, if we'll just kind of sit back, our economy's improving, and I know that, the teachers don't like to hear that. I think they think they've sat back long enough, and I agree. But I think that we'll get them a raise, but it might be over a period of 2 or 3 years, and I hope that that's what happens.
Definitely a classic example of between a rock and a hard place
Yeah.
kind of deal. So, well, one of our good friends of the Enid Television Network and the Enid community is former Governor George Nye. And George has talked to us a couple times and provided us a history lesson of Oklahoma government. And he would share stories about how he would be, as lieutenant governor and governor, how he'd get both sides to work together. And George is such a humorist in getting people to work together. So my final question to you, Senator, is what would be your suggestions of helping both political sides work together to fix major problems? Or is everybody already doing that? I just didn't know if you had any additional suggestions.
Well, we need to leave the politics
If
clear.
you were governor, how would you get everybody to work together? I guess that's my question.
I would hope that we would leave politics out of the process and do what's best for the state. The way the political makeup is of the legislature, and I've said this before, again, the 640 deal, 25% of the members are driving the boat right now. Where the two extremes of the parties have joined hands on the backside, and they're one does not want any revenue. They think they've got plenty. They don't want to grow government, and then the other side, they don't think that there's enough revenue there, and they have kind of unrealistic, in my opinion, ways of raising that revenue. So. If I was governor, I guess I would really try to reach out on both sides and just try to realize that we want a better image than what the state really has, and that we can do better, and let's work together and get it done.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. Well, Senator, we're through with our scheduled questions, if you will. But I know you have your newsletter, and you talked about you do your best to get it out every 2 or 3 weeks. But I wanted to provide you this opportunity to speak to your constituents in the 4 counties. And you feel free, take a minute or so, and just, if there's anything on your mind and heart that you wanted to share with everyone, you can do so right now. And we'll make this part of your newsletter as you're communicating with everyone.
Okay, I'm going to leave Steve with my Senate page. You can go. Senator Roland Pederson. I have a Facebook page, a personal Facebook page, and then I kind of have a political Facebook page. And I'll leave Steve with that, how to get on that and how to access that.
We'll put that on the screen for you while we're talking.
And you can go to oksenate.gov, and you can follow the Senate bills as they advance through the committee process and through the floor. We've finished work in the committees for the Senate bills, and we're working to get those through the floor legislation, and then they'll go over to the House, and we'll take the House bills, and the committee process will start again, and then all those that survive, they'll send them to the governor's office to see if she will sign them. And so I try to be accessible. My assistant does a very good job of answering the phone and making sure that I get the conversations that need to take place, and I try to be accessible as I can.
Great. Senator, it's a pleasure to always visit with you. You're just a wealth of information, and we appreciate you sharing what's going on in the Capitol with all of our viewers, and sincerely, we appreciate how you represent District 19, especially involving Garfield County, and we just thank you for that.
Thanks for having me on here, Steve, and look forward to visiting with you again.
Very good. We'll do it next time. And it's always a pleasure to bring you the special guests. So thank you for joining us on City Connections today. Again, our special guest, Senator Roland Pederson, representing District 19. Until next time, this is Steve Keim, encouraging everyone to make it a great day. Thanks for joining us.